President Trump has talked twice in recent days, once at the Kennedy Center and then to Reuters again last night about canceling the election. Why is he talking about this?
I believe you're referring to the president's interview at Reuters last night. I was in that interview. It was a closed-door interview. Obviously, there was not audio or video. The president was simply joking. He was saying, we're doing such a great job. We're doing everything the American people thought. Maybe we should just keep rolling. But he was speaking facetiously.
And then one more.
We had the worst president, did the worst job. They had the worst policy. We have to even run against these people. Now, I won't say cancel the election. They should cancel the election because the fake news will say, he wants the elections canceled. He's a dictator. They always call me a dictator.
And now he's considering a more drastic escalation from Minneapolis. Today, Donald Trump threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act, a rarely used law that would allow him to send the U.S. military into the streets. But unlike his National Guard deployments, invoking the Insurrection Act would allow those troops to carry out law enforcement functions like making arrests and conducting searches. It would militarize the city of Minneapolis, pitting U.S. service members against their fellow Americans.
What's up, everybody? Major Retired Richard Ojeda here, and protests are exploding across this country. People are scared. People are angry. ICE are killing people. The economy is in the shitter, and everything feels like it's coming apart at the seams. So in one of the darkest moments in modern American history, what do you think a leader should say to calm the country down? Something about unity, stability, maybe reassurance that democracy still matters. Nope. How about this instead? We shouldn't even have an election ahead of the midterms.
Two questions. First, a follow-up on one of my colleagues who asked you about the president's interview with Reuters. You said that he was joking about canceling the elections, but Americans for generations have fought and died for democracy, for this democracy. Are you saying that the president finds the idea of canceling elections funny?
Andrew, were you in the room? No, you weren't. I was in the room. I heard the conversation, and only someone like you would take that so seriously and pose it as a question in that way.
During a sit-down with the flatulent 47 himself, Donnie Boy made it clear what he is really thinking about: fear. Fear is his Republican Party could lose control of the House. Fear they could lose the Senate. Fear that voters might finally hold them accountable in this year's midterms elections. And we're already seeing that panic spread. Mike Johnson is out there warning Republicans that if Democrats win, we're all going to jail. Steve Bannon, that old moldy can of spam, is pushing the same apocalyptic paranoia. This isn't strategy. This is a movement bracing for consequences.
Do you think he'd actually try to invoke it now?
I think he will. I think he will invoke it.
You think he'll do it?
And this has been, I think he will do it. This has been 10 years in the making. He has been searching for almost a decade for the excuse, the right moment, the pretext, the visuals that would justify him invoking the Insurrection Act. And I can remember, Jen, when he first thought he had it, or one of the times he thought he had it, it was the eve of his State of the Union address in 2019. And we had to rush to the White House to intercept him in the map room as he was practicing on the teleprompter and keep him from having the stenographer type in an invocation of the Insurrection Act into the address.
Trump even acknowledged what everyone understands, that the president's party often takes losses in the midterms after a presidential victory. But instead of accepting that as democracy working, he waved it away as some deep psychological thing. When you win the presidency, he said, you don't win the midterms. Donnie Boy, get ready for a psychological twist you're really not going to like. Because America is exhausted. People are sick of the chaos, sick of the threats, sick of being told that accountability is somehow unfair. And this time, they're not just voting against you. They're voting out your enablers. They're voting out your fear merchants. They're voting out the people who keep insisting democracy itself is the problem. That's the nightmare you're really afraid of, and it's coming.
Remember, Jen, the law says there needs to be an invasion of the United States, a rebellion, or an insurrection. And a group of people coming to the United States border to claim asylum didn't meet any of those criteria. But I will tell you this, towards the end of my time in that administration, I sat down with Stephen Miller in his office on the second floor of the West Wing. You know the space. And Stephen told me about how if Trump won re-election, it would be a shock and awe blitz of executive orders. And one of those things he would look to do was invoke the Insurrection Act, and they would try to run it up to the Supreme Supreme Court as fast as humanly possible to get a decision. I would not be surprised in the least if this year Donald Trump does it. He spent last year trying to foment circumstances in Los Angeles and Chicago and Portland to justify it. All of those failed. Now in Minneapolis, they see circumstances which to them might seem acceptable for the invocation. To anyone else, it will look lawless and unconstitutional because it will be.
Ordinary Americans aren't angry because of just one thing. They're tired. They're sick and tired. And they're sick of feeling that way. They see a president who promised Iranian protesters that help was coming, while here at home, people watch their own government crack down violently. That promise rings hollow to anyone who lost faith in leadership in this country. They're fed up with grocery prices climbing while wages stay flat. They're fed up with losing access to the health care they counted on. They're terrified about the future of Social Security, something they worked their entire lives for. They're fed up with absurd distractions like trying to buy or threaten Greenland while real problems go ignored. And they're fed up watching ICE operate like a militarized force. Armored vehicles, raids, doors kicked in, not as public safety, but as intimidation. To a lot of Americans, it feels less like law enforcement and more like an occupying force. All of it, the economic squeeze, the healthcare fear, the overreach, the upside-down priorities, feeds a deep, widespread frustration. And after all of that, this was Donald Trump's response. A lot of times, you can't convince a voter. You just do what's right. That's the problem. That's not leadership. That's contempt. That's a president saying voters don't matter. Consent doesn't matter. Accountability doesn't matter. And when you decide the people are the problem, elections stop being a pillar of democracy and start looking like an inconvenience. That's not empathy. That's not strength. That's delusion and denial on a national scale with global consequences. And if all of that wasn't bad enough, you've got Karoline Leavitt out here every single day spreading misinformation on Donald Trump's behalf. This is where it gets absolutely dangerous. Because when Trump floats canceling elections, Leavitt doesn't walk it back. She doesn't reassure the country. She laughs. She tells us not to take threats to cancel elections so seriously. She's not clarifying anything. She's doing exactly what the MAGA media and propaganda machine does when the truth gets too close. They laugh it off. They mock concern. They try to make you feel ridiculous for taking democracy seriously. No, we're not joking anymore. This country is angry. People are scared. People are fed up. And telling the public to calm down while democratic norms are being shredded isn't leadership. It's gaslighting. And this is how it ends every single time. When someone finally pushes back. When a reporter actually does their job and refuses to just swallow the talking point. Karoline Leavitt shuts it down. Andrew Feinberg tries to follow up and asks the obvious question that's on everyone's mind. Does the president think canceling elections is funny? That's not a gotcha. That's a fair, basic question in a democracy. And instead of answering it, Leavitt snaps back. Were you in the room? Think about that for a second. That's not an answer. That's a dodge. It's deflection. It's cowardice dressed up as authority. It's what happens when rhetoric collapses the moment it's exposed to scrutiny. This whole thing falls apart like a house of cards the second someone shines a light on it. When the lie can't survive a follow-up question, the response isn't facts. It's attitude. It's ego. It's vague appeals to insider status and a smirking dismissal meant to shut the conversation down. Leavitt isn't explaining anything. She's functioning like a fog machine, a blur of MAGA talking points, distraction, deflection, and intimidation designed to make the room uncomfortable enough that people stop pressing. That's the point. Laugh it off, belittle the question, move on before accountability actually catches up. This is how the entire MAGA media ecosystem works. They don't inform, they don't clarify, they overwhelm and confuse until people give up and tune out. But here's the problem for them this time. People aren't tuning out. They're asking questions because elections matter. They're asking because power matters. And they're asking because when leaders start treating democracy like a joke, history tells us exactly where that road leads. And the fact that the official White House response to all of this is to mock the question instead of answering it tells you everything that you need to know about how seriously they take democracy and how seriously the rest of us should take the threat. And let's be honest about what this really is. This isn't leadership. It's distraction. It's noise. It's chaos by design. They're cooking all of this up because they know exactly what's coming, and they're terrified of it. They know they're going to lose badly. They've already said it out loud. Mike Johnson is out there warning that if Democrats wins, Republicans are going to lose their jobs. Steve Bannon is openly talking about going to jail. That's not confidence. That's panic. That's a movement staring down accountability and trying to outrun it. So they escalate, they lie, they spin, they flood the zone until it feels like we're rats in a cage, running in circles, exhausted, hoping people will eventually give up and stop paying attention. That's the runaround. That's the game. But here's the part they didn't count on. People are done. People are sick and tired of the lies, sick of the chaos, sick of representatives who serve billionaires instead of voters. We want leaders who represent us, not donors, not corporations, not a political class lining its own pockets. And that's why all of this noise won't save them. Because this year, the distractions end, the excuses end, and the accountability they've been dodging finally catches up. And no amount of spin can stop that. And that is an absolute fact. Sappers clear the way, airborne all the way.